Have you ever wondered about toilets in ancient Rome? Now, I know what you're thinking. Toilets? Really? That sounds boring. But wait, don't flush the idea just yet. Imagine this. You're sitting in a large stone room, not alone, but with a dozen other people, all lined up side by side, having casual conversations, sharing gossip, maybe even discussing the latest gladiator fight, all while, well, taking care of personal business. Yes, you heard that right. Public toilets in ancient Rome weren't just for relieving oneself. They were social spaces. Now comes the best part, or the strangest. When it was time to clean up, you wouldn't be reaching for soft, perfumed toilet paper. Oh no. Instead, you'd grab a sponge, attached to a stick, dipped in vinegar water, and wait for it shared with everyone else. Charming, isn't it? It may sound bizarre today, but back then it was completely normal. And believe it or not, the Romans were quite proud of their toilet system. In this video we're going to dive deep, though not too deep, thank goodness, into the surprising world of ancient Roman restrooms. Along the way you'll hear some strange, funny, and downright awkward tales that might just change how you see history, and maybe even how you feel about modern plumbing. So lean back, close your eyes, and get ready to smile, chuckle, and maybe learn something new as we gently stroll down the stone paths of Roman sanitation. Because history, even toilet history, can be oddly soothing. Tonight's story takes us on an unexpectedly delightful journey through the forgotten corners of ancient Roman life, where stone, sponge, and social chatter met in the most curious of places, the public toilet. Yes, you heard that right. So pull up a blanket, settle into your pillow, and let's begin with 8 gentle chapters from the not-so-boring world of Roman hygiene. Chapter 1. The Dawn of Public Cleanliness. Roman toilets were more than just a place to, In this opening chapter we'll take a seat, quite literally, beside ancient Romans and explore how their public toilets weren't just about nature's call. They were community hubs. Places where business was discussed, gossip flowed like water, and politics occasionally made an appearance between flushes. Who knew sanitation could be so social? Chapter 2. Marble thrones and flowing sewers. The architecture behind Roman restrooms. Here we'll peek into the engineering marvels beneath those humble latrines. Intricate drainage systems, clever stone seating with just the right curves, and aqueduct-powered flushing mechanisms. Let's just say the Romans weren't just going, they were going in style. Chapter 3. The sponge on a stick, Rome's version of toilet paper. Now brace yourself for this one, because before the age of soft, perfumed tissue, the Romans had something far more squishy. The xylospongium, a communal sponge on a stick. We'll gently wade through Roman hygiene habits, sanitation challenges, and why you really didn't want to be the last person to use the sponge. Chapter 4. Strange tales from the latrine, the most unexpected stories from Roman toilets. Think toilets are boring? Think again. From political conspiracies whispered over the hum of flowing water, to eerie tales of snakes slithering up through the sewer, to even a few alleged murders, this chapter is full of eyebrow-raising, head-shaking, toilet seat edge tales you've likely never heard before. Chapter 5. A Sociological Flush. What toilets say about Roman society. In this chapter we'll sit back and reflect. How did rich and poor experience these facilities differently? What do communal bathrooms say about Roman values, class, and cleanliness? Surprisingly, a lot. And yes, this chapter may make you rethink your bathroom break entirely. Chapter 6. From marble benches to modern bowls, the long journey of sanitation. Ever wondered how we went from Roman bathhouses to cozy, flushable conveniences? This chapter compares Roman hygiene innovations with later periods, from medieval chamber pots to today's smart toilets. It's a fascinating trip through time and, thankfully, a much cleaner one. Chapter 7. The Roman Restroom Legacy. What we still carry today. Their legacy lives on. From sewage systems to urban planning, the Romans laid some of the earliest foundations of public health. In this chapter, we explore how their ideas still ripple through our cities and our bathrooms today. Chapter 8, Things You Never Thought About Toilets, but Will Now. We'll close with a gentle look back at the odd, the ingenious, the surprisingly beautiful world of sanitation history. You may never look at your toilet the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be a bit more grateful for the clean, quiet solitude of your modern restroom. Because in the end, even the humblest place can tell a powerful story, and every flush, well, has a history behind it. Now close your eyes. Let the soft rustle of Roman togas and the distant trickle of aqueducts lull you to sleep. Because even in the quiet corners of history, there's magic. And sometimes that magic begins right where you least expect it. No need to keep you waiting any longer. Let's dive right in, together. Let's step gently into the curious, and at times, a little smelly world of ancient Roman toilets. Chapter 1. The Dawn of Public Cleanliness. Roman toilets were more than just a place to go. Now, when you think of ancient Rome, you probably imagine grand colosseums, marble statues, or togas flapping in the breeze. But tonight, we're setting all that grandeur aside, because we're heading somewhere a little more down to earth. Yes, friends, we're going to the bathroom. But not just any bathroom. We're talking about the Roman latrina, a place where marble met manure, and where even emperors, philosophers, and humble citizens shared a very intimate kind of public life. So, fluff your pillow, take a deep breath, and prepare yourself for a journey into the strange, surprisingly social, and slightly stinky world of ancient Roman sanitation. Part 1. When private business was everybody's business. Have you ever paused just before bedtime to wonder, before the age of modern plumbing and fancy private bathrooms, where exactly did people go when nature called? Especially in the mighty Roman Empire, a bustling world where millions of citizens shared the same crowded cities. Surely they couldn't all rely on a bush or the nearest riverbank forever, right? Well, dear listener, let's take a quiet step back in time and revisit how the ancient Romans redefined the idea of public hygiene. Now brace yourself gently, because what we're about to uncover may be quite a surprise. You see, when we think of public toilets today, we might imagine rows of closed doors, private stalls, soft music playing, maybe a nice little air freshener doing its best in the corner. But in ancient Rome, that idea would have seemed downright odd. The Roman toilet, known as the latrina, wasn't a private retreat. Oh no, it was a social event. Picture this. You walk into a large, echoey room lined with long stone benches, each bench carved with a neat row of holes. You take a seat right next to your fellow citizens, and together in the open air you all, well, go about your business. No walls, no doors, no shame, just a shared experience, and perhaps even a chat to pass the time. To us, that may sound like a nightmare from a public restroom horror story, but to the Romans, it was completely normal. They didn't really have our modern sense of bathroom privacy. In fact, for them, these spaces served as community centers, places where merchants could network, nobles could discuss politics, and ordinary folks could catch up on gossip, all while sitting cheek to cheek, quite literally. Imagine closing a business deal, or debating military strategy, all to the background symphony of flushing water, earthy aromas, and your neighbor's relieved sigh. Unforgettable, wouldn't you say? But wait, not all Roman toilets were created equal. Some were opulent spaces adorned with marble seats, frescoed walls, even statues of gods watching over you, helpful or awkward, you decide. These were reserved for the elite. Meanwhile, the common folk had simpler setups. No divine decor, no fancy seats. Just the basics and a bucket of water if you were lucky. This might sound like trivia, but it reveals something quite profound about Roman society. To them, sanitation wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about status, community, even politics. Using the toilet wasn't just a biological need. It was a chance to be part of the Roman machine. A moment where life's most humble activity was woven into the grandeur of an empire. So next time you enjoy your quiet, solitary bathroom break, spare a thought for the Romans, who believed that going together was better than going alone. And with that image, a marble toilet, a toga-clad senator, and some rather awkward small talk, let your eyes gently close and drift into the curious dreams of ancient times, where even the bathroom had no secrets. Part 2, a place for gossip, business deals, and even a game of chess. Now, when we think of Roman public toilets, we might imagine a purely functional place. A spot to take care of nature's business, quickly, quietly, and privately. But oh no. In ancient Rome, these toilets were so much more than that. They were bustling social hubs. Imagine a modern-day coffee shop, or a members-only lounge, but with, shall we say, an extra feature. You see, the Romans didn't just dash in and out of the latrine. They lingered, they chatted, they negotiated deals. And yes, they occasionally got very political, right there on the bench. Conversations flowed like the water underneath them. Some spoke about the price of grain. Others whispered the latest gossip from the forum. And some? Well, they were closing trade agreements while doing their other business. It gets better. Some of these public toilets even had vendors nearby, selling snacks and drinks. So, you could grab a bite while relieving yourself. Convenient? Definitely. Perhaps just a little. But remember, for the Romans, this wasn't odd at all. This was daily life. Now here's where it gets even more delightful. Archaeologists have found markings on stone benches. Signs that people actually played board games while sitting there. Yes, picture this. You're sitting in the latrine, toga neatly gathered, and across from you your friend leans in, eyes narrowed. Your move, he says. You glance down at the carved board between you. Then, with the most serious face, you push your token forward. Checkmate, and bowel relief, all in one visit. Strange? Maybe to us. But to the Romans, this was as natural as picking up the morning paper. Public and private life blurred into one. And they didn't mind it at all. In fact, the placement of these restrooms was no accident. The Romans built them in the busiest places, next to bathhouses, city forums, and vibrant marketplaces. So after a good steamy soak in the thermi, you'd stroll out, refreshed and glowing. And where to next? To the toilet, naturally. Not just to, go, but to catch up with a friend. Hear the latest news. Maybe challenge someone to a quick game. These spots weren't just convenient. They were vital. They brought people together. Rich or poor, merchant or philosopher. All sat side by side, in a curious kind of harmony. And so, these humble latrines became a key part of Rome's social rhythm. Not just waste disposal, but community connection. And occasionally, a well-timed checkmate. Part 3, Cleanliness with Class, the lavish latrini of the Roman elite. Not all latrini were created equal. In fact, the differences between Roman public toilets were so striking, they might as well have been wearing togas made of silk or sackcloth, depending on who you were. You see, in ancient Rome, even the humble act of, answering nature's call, came wrapped in layers of wealth and social status. For the upper crust of Roman society, the senators, generals, wealthy merchants, using the toilet wasn't just about practicality. Oh no, it was an experience, a statement, a golden flush of luxury, if you will. Their toilets, far from being dim, stony stalls of necessity, were marvels of marble, smooth, glistening, polished stone that caught the sunlight like the halls of Olympus itself. Walls were adorned with exquisite frescoes, paintings of gods lounging in leisure, serene landscapes, or swirling tales from mythology, all carefully crafted so that as you sat, you had something truly divine to look at. After all, why stare at a blank wall when you could gaze into the eyes of Apollo while you contemplated the meaning of digestion? The floors? Ah yes. Mosaic tiles, colorful and intricate, laid out like a royal tapestry underfoot. Some featured vines, others ocean scenes, and some, perhaps cheekily, depicted dolphins dancing. Because nothing says classy like marine life watching over your private moments. And in the niches of these marble sanctuaries, tiny statues of gods or heroic figures were nestled, perhaps there for protection, or maybe just for moral support. Let's not forget the lighting. Large windows let in streams of natural sunshine, giving the entire chamber a bright, airy glow. It was almost like the gods themselves were saying, "We see you, and we approve." But perhaps the true star of the show was the seat. No rough-hewn stone or cold slab for Rome's upper echelon. No, no. These were sculpted thrones of marble, sometimes fitted with padded cushions or even a graceful backrest. Yes, a backrest, because comfort clearly should never end at the waistline. Picture, you're perched on your elegantly carved toilet seat, chatting with a fellow noble about the latest gladiator match, or maybe gossiping about Claudia's scandalous new hairstyle, all while admiring the flickering golden sunlight on your favorite fresco. It may have been a public space, but it certainly didn't feel like it. These elite latrini were as much about status as they were about sanitation. They whispered, no, shouted, wealth and prestige, reminding everyone that even the most private acts in Roman life could be dressed up in grandeur. Yes, in the Roman Empire, even doing your business could be a masterpiece. Part 4. The private toilet, a luxury few could afford. Let's take a quiet little stroll into the lavatorial lives of ancient Romans. Now, while public toilets in ancient Rome were thriving hubs of daily life, bustling, noisy, and oddly social, the idea of having a private toilet right there inside your own home, well, that was a bit like owning a golden bathtub today. It was a luxury, not a norm. Most ordinary Romans, especially those crammed into the towering apartment blocks known as insulae, didn't have that kind of privilege. These buildings rose several stories high, packed with families, noise, cooking, smoke, but sadly no built-in bathrooms. So where did they go? Simple. They made use of public latrines, or more unfortunately makeshift pit toilets. Yes, not quite the Pinterest-worthy bathroom of your dreams. Of course, all this improvising came with its fair share of issues, like questionable hygiene and the not-so-fresh scent wafting through the narrow streets. But that's a tale for another night. We'll explore the health and sanitation drama in future chapters. Now, if you were among the elite, the domus dwellers, the villa owners, yes, that upper crust of Roman society, then you might have had your very own private toilet. But before you picture marble tiles, scented candles, and a bidet, let's slow down a bit. These private toilets were often just a small corner room, sometimes no more than a humble hole in the floor leading down to a sewer. If you were lucky, there might be a stone seat with a strategically placed opening. Functional, yes. Fragrant? Not exactly. And unlike the grand public toilets with sophisticated drainage, private systems could be, shall we say, a little temperamental. Let's just say odors were loyal house guests. They came, they stayed, and they didn't care much for invitations. Human waste disposal, too, was a job that leaned heavily on manual labor, or relied on narrow, rudimentary drains that tried their best, but often failed. Now, this scarcity of in-house toilets wasn't just about technical limitations. It reflected something deeper about Roman culture. To the Romans, relieving oneself wasn't a hidden, shameful affair. It was, believe it or not, a social activity. Chit-chatting while sitting side by side in a public latrine was not at all uncommon. There was no need to whisper or excuse yourself in embarrassment. It was in many ways as routine and public as buying bread. And constructing a complex plumbing system for every individual home? Too expensive. Too tricky. Too much of a headache. So instead, Rome leaned into what it did best: communal life. Public toilets weren't just practical. They were a symbol of Roman urban planning, social connection, and, Well, teamwork. Because in Rome, even going to the bathroom was a shared experience. Chapter 2: Architecture and Engineering Behind Roman Sanitation. Here we continue to explore interesting things about Roman architecture and sanitary techniques. Part 1: The Unsung Engineers Who Transformed Urban Life. Now then, let's gently continue our journey into the intriguing and surprisingly elegant world of Roman sanitation and architecture. Yes, sanitation, because history isn't all about emperors, battles, and marble columns. Sometimes it's about toilets. Really clever ones. When we think of ancient Rome, the mind often leaps to grand spectacles. The towering Colosseum echoing with the roar of the crowd. Stone-paved roads stretching like veins across a mighty empire. And of course, the breathtaking Pantheon with its heavenly dome. But beneath all that splendor, quite literally beneath it, there existed a quieter marvel. A marvel of water and waste. You see, the Romans weren't just masters of drama and domes. They were pioneers of plumbing. And while their feats may not sparkle like gold in history books, they kept cities alive, clean, and, shall we say, far more pleasant smelling. Unlike many civilizations of their time, the Romans understood something crucial. Waste doesn't just disappear. It needs to be managed or it comes back, often with a vengeance. Rather than simply digging holes or letting sewage drift lazily into the nearest river, the Romans devised something far more sophisticated. An entire underground world of tunnels, drains, pipes, and basins, all built with astonishing precision. Now, we're not talking about modern engineers with laptops and reinforced concrete. No, sir. These Roman engineers had nothing but brainpower, bricks, and a very strong sense of smell. They didn't run computer simulations or attend university lectures on hydraulics. Instead, they observed the flow of water. They experimented with gradients and gravity. And they built systems so sturdy, some are still here, quietly doing their job 2,000 years later. We may never know their names. They weren't emperors or generals. But these anonymous builders laid the foundation, quite literally, for the concept of urban sanitation. They figured out how to use water to carry waste away. How to construct aqueducts and tunnels that worked with nature, not against it. And how to craft public baths, fountains, and yes, even toilets that didn't just serve a purpose, but did so with style. And get this, these networks didn't just connect to public latrines. They extended to bathhouses, fountains, and even the private villas of the Roman elite. Because why should luxury stop at the bath? It's a remarkable story of how the basic need to go quietly became part of a grand civilizational tapestry. One where urban planning, engineering brilliance, and human decency came together to make Rome not just powerful, but livable. So tonight, as you settle into your cozy bed, spare a thought for the Roman engineers, those unsung heroes of hygiene, who made sure that even in a city of 1 million people, the streets stayed clean, and the empire didn't stink. Rest easy. We've only just begun to explore the marvels beneath Roman feet. Part 2: The Underground Network, Cloaca Maxima and the Roman Sewers. Now, let's take a quiet step beneath the marble streets of ancient Rome. Down below the bustling forum, beyond the sandals and tunics, lies something far less glamorous, yet utterly magnificent: the sewers. Ah yes, the Cloaca Maxima. Don't let the name fool you. The Great Drain may sound like a plumbing nightmare, but in reality, it's one of the most impressive engineering marvels of the ancient world. Originally built sometime in the 6th century BC, yes, that's over 2,500 years ago, the Cloaca Maxima began as a humble open-air canal, simply meant to drain the swampy areas surrounding the Forum Romanum. But Romans, being the overachievers they were, couldn't just leave it at that. As the city grew, so did its plumbing ambitions. Over time, this little drainage ditch evolved into a sprawling, subterranean labyrinth, stretching for kilometers under the city like a great stone serpent, silently carrying away wastewater from public baths, latrines, and homes, and emptying it all, with great dignity, into the river Tiber. Now, before you wrinkle your nose too much, here's the thing. The Cloaca Maxima wasn't just effective, it was durable. We're talking about enormous slabs of stone, fitted together with the kind of precision that would make a modern contractor weep with envy. Some sections of the sewer were so wide, in fact, that a horse-drawn cart, or even a small boat, could float or roll through with ease. Imagine that, an underground river highway for, well, less than glamorous cargo. And thanks to this generous size, maintenance crews, yes, Rome had those too, could crawl inside to clean or repair things when needed. Quite a bit more advanced than the average modern clogged toilet, don't you think? But Cloaca Maxima wasn't alone down there. Oh no, it had friends, an intricate network of smaller lateral sewers and drainage pipes, all humming away quietly beneath the city streets. These side channels connected everything, from bathhouses and fountains, to public toilets and private homes. And here's the genius. Rome's aqueducts, those majestic water-carrying marvels, didn't just bring clean water in. They also kept the dirty water moving out. Thanks to a carefully calculated slope, just enough to keep the flow going but not so much that it rushed, water flowed constantly through the sewers. It gently whisked waste away in a kind of never-ending river of relief, a self-cleaning system before self-cleaning was even a concept. Designing all this wasn't just a matter of digging ditches and hoping for the best. No, it took real know-how. They had to study the land, understand the behavior of water, and build with stone and brick in ways that would stand the test of time, and test it did. Because here's the kicker. Some parts of the Cloaca Maxima are still functioning today. Still quietly doing their duty beneath the modern streets of Rome. Still proving that ancient engineering wasn't just about temples and triumphal arches. It was also about waste management. In a way, the sewer system was the silent heartbeat of Rome, the hidden veins keeping the city clean, healthy, and functioning. A quiet champion in a time when medicine was still just a curious mixture of herbs, hope, and maybe a prayer to Asclepius. So the next time you flush your toilet, spare a thought for the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's grand and glorious gift to the world of drainage. Part 3. The all-in-one seat and the gentle stream, the comforts of the latrine. Now imagine this with me. You step into a Roman public toilet, and no, it's not quite the fragrant lavender-scented restroom of a modern cafe. But for its time? Oh, it was the very image of innovation. What greets you is a long, sturdy bench. Sometimes carved from stone, sometimes made of good old-fashioned wood. It stretches along the wall like a minimalist Roman sofa. Except, well, you wouldn't want to lie down on it. Evenly spaced along the bench are round openings, neat little holes, each one a personal invitation to, shall we say, sit and reflect on life. These holes lead straight down to a drainage channel underneath, quietly whisking away whatever thoughts you leave behind. Now here comes the genius bit. Just in front of the bench runs a shallow little water channel, like a gentle brook for your toes. This stream is constantly fed by aqueducts or storage tanks, flowing day and night. But it's not for dipping your feet, oh no. Its purpose was rather more hygienic. Romans, you see, didn't use toilet paper. Instead, they had a sponge on a stick. Yes, you heard right. And after doing their business, they dipped that sponge into this flowing stream, give it a good rinse, and return it to a communal spot for the next guest. We'll talk more about that surprisingly well-traveled sponge in the next chapter, so stay tuned. Now you might be wondering, what about the smell? Well, clever Roman builders thought of that too. Many latrini were built with large open windows or vents in the roof, allowing fresh air to circulate, nature's very own deodorizer. Not perfect, of course, but better than you might expect. Those stone seats? Let's just say, they offered a brisk wake-up call in winter. But in more luxurious latrines you might find wooden seats. Even padded ones if your bottom had enough social status. And yes, Romans even accounted for children. Some latrines included smaller holes for younger users. How thoughtful. Sure, there were no doors or partitions. No occupied signs. You just sat down next to your fellow citizen and carried on with your day. Perhaps even a little conversation, because in Rome, privacy wasn't always the priority. But functionally, the system worked like a charm. It served large communities, kept the city cleaner, and, let's be honest, it gave everyone a daily moment to pause. The simplicity of it all, stone benches, flowing water, clever ventilation, is what made Roman latrines such a quiet marvel of urban planning. They weren't just toilets. They were a reflection of the Roman mindset. Efficient, communal, and surprisingly forward-thinking. So next time you're in a modern restroom, perhaps give a little nod of thanks to the Romans for their all-in-one seat and the ever-flowing little stream that started it all. Part 4. From aqueducts to toilets, a perfect cycle of water. Now, dear listener, let's take a leisurely stroll through one of the most quietly heroic achievements of Roman civilization. No, not the Colosseum, not the legions. We're talking about something far more down to earth. The journey of water, from lofty mountains to the humble Roman toilet. Yes, tonight, we pay tribute to the ancient plumbing that made it all flow so smoothly. To keep the grand system of public sanitation humming along in the Roman world, one thing was absolutely essential. Water. A lot of it. Flowing constantly. Every single day. And that, my friend, was the job of the legendary Roman aqueducts. These weren't just fancy stone bridges for tourists to take selfies with. Oh no. These towering arcs were the arteries of life, channeling water from distant mountain springs, rushing rivers, and serene highland lakes. Down, down, down into the beating heart of the city. And what a journey it was. The water would glide gracefully across a sprawling network of open-air channels, underground pipes, and, most impressively, over colossal stone bridges built with such precise angles. You'd think the Romans had a chat with gravity itself. But here's the twist. The water didn't just burst into your average Roman's kitchen sink. They didn't have those, by the way. Instead, it flowed into castella, large holding tanks that looked like ancient stone bathtubs for giants. From these reservoirs, water was graciously divvied out to the city's VIPs. And by VIPs we mean the glorious public baths, thermae, sparkling fountains that probably splashed more than they hydrated. And of course, the ever-charming public toilets. Now, before you wrinkle your nose, let's appreciate the genius here. These toilets weren't just holes in the ground. They were masterpieces of engineering. The water from the aqueducts flowed beneath them, constantly moving, flushing waste away and scrubbing the sewer system clean as a whistle. No pumps. No machines. Just the natural force of gravity doing its job. 24/7. Down went the waste. Into the hidden veins of the city, underground sewers that carried it far, far away. Until eventually, everything reached the grand finale of Roman drainage. The Cloaca Maxima. A name that's as fun to say as it is important. This great drain was the final farewell for all the used-up water, waste, and other things. From there, everything spilled into nearby rivers or the sea, carried off like forgotten memories. And so, this whole brilliant water ballet, from majestic aqueducts to quietly gurgling toilets, formed a loop. A loop that didn't just clean the streets, it cleaned the empire. It was sustainable in its own ancient way, efficient and shockingly modern in concept. Because at the end of the day, what kept the Roman Empire going for centuries wasn't just its armies or emperors. It was the water. Flowing, flushing, cleansing. A testament to Roman engineering, their love for order, and their refusal to let anything, even waste, disrupt the serenity of city life. So next time you flush your toilet, dear listener, take a moment and whisper a soft thank you to those ancient Roman engineers. Chapter 3. Sponge on a Stick, the toilet paper of the Romans and other delicate matters of cleanliness. Now, we gently tiptoe into what may be, perhaps the most unique and curiously fascinating part of Roman restrooms. How exactly did the ancient Romans keep themselves clean? Take a deep breath. because what you're about to hear might surprise you, or at least raise an eyebrow or two. Yes, we're talking about hygiene, but in the Roman way. Imagine stepping into a grand, echoing public latrine. Marble benches lined up like seats in a theater, except the show here is, well, rather private. And now comes the star of the evening. Stick. With a sponge. Soaked in vinegar or salty water. Share. Yes, shared, among users. Let's just say. Personal space wasn't exactly a Roman concept. And while the idea might make our modern minds squirm just a little, to the Romans, it was just another day of civil engineering brilliance and communal convenience. So lean back, close your eyes if you'd like, and picture it all gently, as we continue our quiet wander through the quirks of Roman daily life, one sponge on a stick at a time. Part 1. Xylospongium, the one and only toilet paper of ancient Rome. Picture this. You've just stepped out of the bathroom in the modern world. What's the next thing you usually do? Chances are, you wash your hands and, well, reach for the toilet paper, right? Simple. Routine. Hygienic. But, let's now close our eyes and drift back far into the past. To the bustling bathhouses and public toilets of ancient Rome. Back then, the idea of toilet paper as we know it, simply didn't exist. Instead, the Romans had something, shall we say, innovative? A tool both iconic and just a little controversial. Its name? Xylospongium. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? But don't be fooled, this wasn't some luxurious spa device. It was quite literally a natural sea sponge, tied to the end of a wooden, or sometimes metal, stick. Yes, you heard that right. A sponge on a stick. Now imagine this scene with me for a moment. You've just finished your business in a crowded Roman public toilet. There's no privacy, just a stone bench with holes, side by side with your fellow citizens. When you're done, you reach for, yes, the communal sponge stick. After use, the sponge would be rinsed, either in a flowing water channel running beneath the benches, or dunked into a bucket of strong salt water or vinegar. Now brace yourself, because here's the real kicker. That same sponge stick was shared, used by one person, then passed to the next, and the next, and the next. A real, bonding experience, wouldn't you say? To the modern mind this might seem, well, a bit ick. But for the Romans it made perfect sense. Their idea of cleanliness was different. If the sponge was rinsed in water, it was considered clean enough. And let's be honest, from their perspective, using a tool with a handle was far more civilized than using one's bare hands. There was, in this peculiar practice, a kind of brilliance. The Mediterranean Sea offered an endless supply of natural sponges. They were soft, absorbent, reusable, and frankly, kind of eco-friendly. So while it might make us cringe today, the humble xylospongium was a staple of Roman bathroom culture. Not just a quirky tool, but a reflection of the Romans' practical mindset, finding clever ways to adapt to the world around them. Yes, even when it came to wiping. So the next time you reach for a roll of two-ply in your cozy bathroom, spare a thought for the ancient Roman, who reached for a sponge on a stick, and hoped the person before him had rinsed it really well. Sleep tight. And may your dreams tonight not feature ancient Roman toilets. Part 2. Other cleaning methods and the great Roman debate on cleanliness. Now, while the xylospongium, that curious stick and sponge contraption, was certainly the star of Roman hygiene, it wasn't the only tool in their sanitary arsenal. The wealthier citizens, those with a bit more denarii in their pockets, had options. Luxurious ones even. Instead of sharing a communal sponge on a stick, which, let's be honest, doesn't exactly scream exclusive, some opted for alternatives. Fresh leaves, soft grasses, or for the true connoisseur of cleanliness, strips of cloth. Yes, a nice bit of linen might grace one's behind, if you were fortunate enough to afford such finery. But let's not romanticize it too much. These alternatives, while perhaps more pleasant in theory, weren't exactly practical in the hustle and bustle of a public latrine. There's a reason the humble xylospongium became the standard. Convenience often trumps comfort when nature calls. Now, we mustn't forget the most important component of Roman hygiene: water. Yes, flowing, ever-present water. Public latrines were ingeniously designed with a channel of constantly moving water, conveniently placed just in front of your stone seat. This allowed the xylospongium to be rinsed after use. Though to be clear, rinsed might be a generous description. Roman citizens also washed their hands and other relevant parts after doing their business, usually at public basins or inside the great communal bathhouses known as thermae. These weren't just places to scrub the body. They were social hubs filled with gossip, politics, steamy arguments, and steamy air. Think of them as a blend between a day spa and a lively coffee shop. If the coffee shop also included hot pools, cold plunges, and the occasional philosophical debate while naked. Bathing regularly at the thermae was not only a personal habit but a civic duty of sorts. It helped rinse away the grime of the day and, more importantly, kept diseases from spreading too rapidly through the crowded streets of Rome. But, despite these efforts, Roman public toilets were far from perfect sanctuaries of cleanliness. Let's pause and paint the picture, shall we? Imagine a crowded room. A dozen or more strangers. All seated on marble benches with holes in them. All sharing the same communal sponge. All dipping it into the same little trench of water before handing it off to the next person. Now take a moment to imagine the smell. Sure, they had drainage systems and ventilation shafts. The Romans were clever like that. But even the cleverest engineering couldn't fully overcome the stinging sting of ammonia, or the delightful bouquet of organic matter from a dozen human beings doing their business in close quarters. It was, how shall we say, an immersive sensory experience. Yes, the Romans were advanced. They brought us aqueducts, concrete, and roads that still exist today. But when it came to public toilet hygiene, they still had a few things to learn. And perhaps the greatest Roman debate of all wasn't about war or philosophy, or the rise and fall of empires, but rather this simple, timeless question. Can something really be clean if everyone's been touching it? Sleep on that thought tonight, and thank the stars for private bathrooms. Part 3, Health Hazards, when Roman cleanliness wasn't quite clean enough. Now, let's not be too hard on the Romans. After all, for their time, they were exceptionally advanced when it came to sanitation. Aqueducts, sewers, public baths. Oh, they were the envy of the ancient world. But, yes, there's always a but. Their public health game still had a few holes. And perhaps the biggest one of all came in the form of a deceptively innocent object. The xylospongium. Yes, my friend. That humble stick with a sponge at the end, shared among everyone using the public toilets, was a straight-up express lane for all kinds of unpleasant diseases. We're talking cholera, typhoid, dysentery, and a cocktail of gut-loving parasites just waiting for a ride. Now the Romans did rinse these sponges. Credit where credit's due. But you and I both know that giving it a quick dip in vinegar water isn't quite the same as, say, blasting it in an autoclave. Germs lingered, multiplied, and traveled from behind to behind in a most undignified parade. Don't believe me? Archaeologists have taken a peek at ancient Roman skeletons and, let's just say, they weren't short on uninvited guests. Worms. Tapeworms. Whoopworms. Roundworms. If it had worm in the name, there was a good chance it had taken up residence in some unsuspecting Roman belly. And that's despite the Romans having a relatively advanced sewer system. Turns out it wasn't so much the pipes that were the problem, but the people. Poor personal hygiene habits and iffy waste management practices meant that even with flowing water, public toilets were far from sparkling clean havens. And let's talk about those public toilets, shall we? They were cozy little gathering spots, social even, but also the perfect breeding grounds for disease. You had your regular cast of characters, rodents, flies, and all sorts of insects, drawn in by the lovely aroma and endless buffet. And when flies came to party, they often brought gifts, bacteria, viruses, maybe even a tapeworm egg or two. Oh, and remember those fancy Roman sewers with the flowing water? They weren't always flowing. When the water stopped, or backed up, it was more than just unpleasant. It became a stew of pathogens, bubbling quietly beneath the streets of Rome. But wait, there's more. Beneath those grand marble floors and mosaic tiles, methane gas and other toxic fumes built up in the dark tunnels. Every now and then someone might go in for a quick visit and come out. Well, not at all. Asphyxiation in a Roman toilet. Now that's not the way anyone wants to be remembered. And let's not forget the more dramatic tales of rats. Yes, rats. Climbing right out of the toilet holes. Surprising an unsuspecting citizen mid-business. Imagine sitting down for a peaceful moment, only to have a whiskered face pop up from below. Suffice it to say, not every Roman toilet trip ended in relaxation. So, while we admire the Roman dedication to sanitation, it's safe to say that their bathrooms were still a bit of a gamble. A mix of convenience, innovation, and potential terror. But hey, at least they didn't have to deal with clogged plumbing from too much toilet paper. Somehow I think they'd envy us just a little. So as you gently close your eyes tonight, be grateful for your private bathroom, your soap and hand sanitizer, and your very own sponge that no one else has to share. Sleep tight, and may your dreams be parasite-free. Part 4. Lessons from the past, the ever-evolving need for cleanliness. Let's take a slow step back and peer gently into the shadowy corners of Roman civilization, where marble columns stood tall, where togas flowed gracefully in the breeze, and where, well, hygiene took its first bold, if slightly soggy, strides. Now, by modern standards, the Roman sanitation system might seem a bit, how shall we say, rustic? Sharing a sponge on a stick doesn't exactly scream five-star bathroom experience, does it? But for their time, oh, the Romans were pioneers. They were among the very first to realize that waste, left unmanaged, tends to become everyone's problem. With sprawling cities filled with thousands, even hundreds of thousands, of citizens, the Romans had to think big. Their aqueducts, sewers, and public latrines weren't just engineering marvels. They were ancient humanity's declaration. We shall not be buried under our own filth. And for that, we salute them. But even the great Romans didn't get everything quite right. Take, for instance, the communal sponge, the xylospongium. Yes, it sounds fancy. Yes, it's fun to say. But no, it was not hygienic. Passing it from person to person in a public lavatory? Let's just say, the germ theory of disease hadn't quite arrived yet. Though they had an impressive grasp of plumbing, they had no idea that invisible little organisms were behind so many of their health woes. No knowledge of bacteria. No idea that one man's sponge could become another's week-long stomachache. Still they tried. They built. They flushed. And in doing so they laid the groundwork, quite literally, for the rest of us. Because today, when we enjoy the luxury of private toilets, soft rolls of toilet paper, antibacterial soap, and advanced sewage treatment, we're standing, or rather sitting, on the shoulders of giants. Giants in sandals, with sponges, on sticks. It's easy to laugh now, and let's be honest, we should. But those sponges tell a bigger story. A story of how far we've come. And how many experiments, some noble, some downright icky, it took to get here. So the next time you flush the toilet in peace and privacy, take a quiet moment. Thank the Romans. Thank their aqueducts. Thank their sewage systems. And yes, thank the humble xylospongium, the sponge on a stick that bravely went where no sponge had gone before. Because without their mess, we might never have found our way to modern cleanliness. Sleep well. And may your dreams be free of shared bathroom tools. Chapter 4, Curious and Unbelievable Tales from Roman Toilets. Yes, toilets. You heard that right. Let's take a moment, breathe in, and prepare to step into one of the most unexpected corners of ancient Roman life. A place you likely don't think about very often, at least not historically. We're talking about Roman toilets. Yes, those humble latrines, often overlooked in the grand tales of emperors and conquests, were the backdrop to some of the most surprising, hilarious, and even dangerous stories of the Roman Empire. So settle in. Let your imagination roam. Because what happens in the toilet apparently didn't always stay in the toilet. Part 1. Toilets, the place for flirting and fatal ambushes. Now, you might think of a toilet as nothing more than a personal retreat, a private moment in a very private place. But for the Romans? Oh no. That was just the beginning. As we've mentioned before, public latrines in Rome were surprisingly social spaces, more like ancient coffee shops than today's restrooms. And this curious setup gave birth to all kinds of bizarre, touching, and yes, sometimes scandalous encounters. Imagine a long row of stone seats side by side with no partitions, just you and your fellow Romans, chatting about politics, family, or maybe that fish sauce recipe everyone's been raving about, all while doing your business. It might sound outrageous to us now, but back then privacy was not the prized virtue we see it as today. In fact, toilets doubled as meeting spots. People flirted there. Some even went on, dare we say it, toilet dates. That's right. There are records suggesting romantic meetings took place right there in the latrine. It's a bit hard to imagine whispering sweet nothings with someone while sitting on cold stone seats, surrounded by the distinct aroma of public life. But hey, when in Rome, right? For the Romans, what mattered wasn't the smell. It was the connection. The comfort of being side by side, even in the most vulnerable of moments. An unfiltered kind of bonding, you might say. But there's always a but in history, isn't there? With all this openness came a darker possibility. Because while you might be sitting there innocently chatting with a new acquaintance, someone else might be lurking, waiting. Yes, public latrines were also ripe for political scheming. With so many people coming and going and very little in the way of guards or protocols, toilets became the perfect place for ambushes. Now picture this. You're a Roman senator. You've made some enemies, and in Rome, who hadn't? And the next thing you know, bam, you're attacked in the one place you least expected. There's even a tale, one of the more infamous ones, about the assassination of Emperor Pertinax in the year 193 CE. Now, to be fair, most records say he was killed while trying to flee into a public bathhouse. But some versions suggest he may have considered hiding in a toilet area. Whether that's completely accurate or just ancient gossip spiced up for drama, it shows us one thing quite clearly. Roman toilets were more than just toilets. They were social hubs. They were danger zones. And occasionally they were the final hiding place of desperate emperors. So the next time you visit a clean, quiet restroom in your modern home, be grateful. No assassins. No surprise blind dates. Just peace. And plumbing? Part 2. Danger from the drain, when hell truly lurked beneath your feet. It might sound a little strange, but Roman toilets weren't always the clean, clever marvels of engineering we like to imagine. In fact, sometimes they were more like traps. You see, beneath those stone benches and flowing water channels lay something far more sinister, the Roman sewer system. Now, this was no small feat of engineering. Oh no, the Cloaca Maxima was impressive. But beneath its well-built arches flowed a pungent, churning brew of decomposing waste. And that delightful mixture created gases. Invisible gases. Nasty gases. Gases with charming names like methane and hydrogen sulfide. Sometimes they wafted up quietly. Other times they surged like a vengeful ghost. And here's the thing. Methane. Odorless, flammable. Hydrogen sulfide. Smells like rotten eggs and can knock you out cold. Historical records. Yes, people actually wrote this down. Mentioned poor souls who fainted or even died. Not from war, not from plague, but from sitting on the loo at the wrong time. Now imagine this. You're a Roman citizen. Sipping wine one moment, answering nature's call the next. Then suddenly, from the dark hole below, a rat. Or worse, a snake. because it wasn't just gases that lurked in the depths. Oh no, the Roman sewers were home to a bustling community of rats, snakes, and curious creatures who didn't always respect boundaries. Flooded tunnels or sudden changes in pressure would send them scampering right up the pipes. Right into the public latrine. Right into your worst nightmare. You thought you were here for a peaceful pit stop. But no, it's now a surprise episode of Wild Rome, Toilet Edition. And yes, there are tales, unconfirmed but deliciously dramatic, of actual sewer explosions. You heard that right. Methane is highly flammable. All it takes is a spark, a nearby torch, maybe a lightning strike, and boom. Suddenly, the communal latrine becomes the least relaxing place in the empire. So while the Romans were undeniably brilliant engineers, they weren't immune to the unintended side effects of their own creations. Beneath the polished marble and flowing water was a bubbling underworld of gas, rodents, and ancient hazards waiting to strike. A little reminder that sometimes, even in mighty Rome, hell wasn't in the afterlife. It was just a few feet below your seat. Part 3. Curses and Secret Spells in the Roman Latrine. Now, let's tiptoe into one of the lesser-known corners of Roman daily life. Not the grand forums, not the glorious amphitheaters, but the latrine. Yes, the toilet. But wait, before you wrinkle your nose and wander off, there's something delightfully curious waiting down here. Because among the echoes of flushing water and creaking wooden seats, lurk curses. Actual curses. You see, the Romans were deeply superstitious folks. They believed that gods, or perhaps wandering spirits, could be summoned to do their bidding. And that included, well, taking revenge on their enemies. And what better place to slip a curse into the world unnoticed than down the drain? These curses, known as depictions, were often etched onto thin sheets of lead or soft metal, carefully inscribed with intentions both petty and profound, then rolled up tightly, and plop, dropped into the sewers, or tossed into streams, fountains, or bath drains, to be carried away to the underworld, where divine agents would hopefully pick them up. And what exactly did these cursed tablets say? Oh, the variety is charmingly dramatic. Some begged the gods to punish a thief. Others condemned a cheating lover. A few demanded catastrophic ruin for business rivals, noisy neighbors, or just someone who looked at them the wrong way. And yes, archaeologists have found many of these little scrolls of vengeance, nestled quietly in Roman toilets and sewage systems. Which, when you think about it, is oddly poetic. Why the toilet, you ask? Well, perhaps because it was the perfect metaphor. A place where, quite literally, your enemy's essence was flushed away. Or maybe it was just one of the few semi-private places in bustling Roman life, where you could whisper your darkest wishes to the gods without being overheard. Just you, your thoughts, and the sound of running water. These tiny curses aren't just archaeological oddities. They're windows, little peepholes, into the Roman psyche. They show us how everyday people tried to shape their fate, with lead ink and a little magic, when reason and Roman law simply weren't enough. Because sometimes, when life gives you lemons, you don't make lemonade. You scribble a curse on lead, and toss it into the nearest toilet. Sleep well knowing that even the mighty Romans had bad days, and very human ways of dealing with them. Part 4. The History of Hygiene, a Mirror of Class and Culture. Yes, the humble Roman toilet. It may sound like an odd place to find history, but beneath those stone seats and echoing chambers lies a tale far deeper than plumbing. You see, Roman toilets weren't just about relief. They were about status, about society, and surprisingly, about conversation. Let's begin with the basics. In ancient Rome, there was a toilet for every class of citizen. The wealthy had their lavish marble latrines and carefully designed public bathhouses, complete with mosaics, fresh running water, and a surprising amount of audience. Meanwhile, the common folks? Well, let's just say their facilities were more on the let's hope the rats aren't home side of things. This clear divide in toilet quality wasn't just architectural. It was a crystal-clear reflection of Rome's deep social hierarchy. Even when doing the most human of all human things, class still mattered. But here's where it gets truly Roman. To them, going to the toilet wasn't a private affair. Not in the least. No doors. No walls. Just long stone benches with holes. And your fellow Romans sitting right beside you, doing the exact same thing. Chatting. Gossiping. Perhaps discussing politics or last night's feast or a questionable oyster. In the Roman worldview, hygiene was a communal event. The idea of solitude or modesty. Foreign concepts. They believed that even the most, let's say, intimate moments could be social. After all, why waste time being alone when you could bond over bowel movements? Of course, not everything was so charming. Let's talk health hazards. Those clever Roman engineers designed aqueducts, sewers, and public baths. But alas, they knew very little about bacteria. The great mystery of invisible germs had yet to be uncovered. And so, beneath the glorious city, sewer gases lurked. Explosive ones even. Rats scurried freely. And the infamous xylospongium. That's right, the communal sponge on a stick. Well, it was shared by everyone. Let's just take a moment to honor the bravery of the Roman behind who went second. Stories of poisonous fumes, biting vermin, and highly questionable sanitation are not just grim details. They remind us how far we've come. Today's modern flush toilet? It's not just a luxury. It's the result of centuries of trial, error, and shared sponges. But in the end, Roman toilets were more than stone and sewage. They were silent historians, whispering tales of daily life, of old superstitions, of power struggles carved into marble, and of one civilization's valiant attempt to make the act of going to the bathroom a little more civilized. So next time you flush, take a moment. Think of the Romans, the laughter, the gossip, the sponge, and remember, who says toilet history has to be boring? Chapter 5. A sociological peek behind the marble curtain. What Roman toilets say about Roman culture. Or how sitting together in public bathrooms told you more about ancient Rome than their poetry ever could. Tonight, as the moonlight gently bathes the ruins of ancient Rome in a silver hue, let us return once more, not to the grand temples or the roaring Colosseum, but to a quieter, humbler corner of Roman life. Yes, dear listener, we're going back to the toilet. You heard me right. We continue our journey through the world of Roman hygiene, by peeking into its sociological soul. Because believe it or not, these seemingly simple lavatories, latrini, were more than just places of release. They were windows into the Roman mind, and mirrors of their culture. Part 1. Public spaces, collective minds, the Roman idea of privacy. Now, let's begin with something that might make modern folks squirm just a little. Privacy, or rather, the surprising absence of it. Today, when we think of using the restroom, we imagine a locked door, a sanctuary of solitude, a quiet moment to collect our thoughts, or, let's be honest, scroll our phones. But in ancient Rome, things were a tad different. Picture this. Rows of stone seats lined up side by side, no partitions, no walls. Just open-air camaraderie and, well, a lot of shared experience. Yes, Roman public toilets were places to sit down, let go, and strike up a conversation. To the modern mind, that sounds like a social nightmare. But for the Romans, it was simply another part of their collective way of life. You see, in ancient Roman society, the line between the individual and the community was rather blurry. Life wasn't built around private bubbles, it revolved around shared spaces. The forum was the heart of politics and social discourse. The thermae, or public baths, served as hubs of relaxation and gossip. And yes, even eating, sleeping, and relieving oneself often took place within sight, sound, or even conversation distance of others. To them, sharing space, even during your most vulnerable moments, wasn't seen as crude or embarrassing. It was natural, part of the rhythm of urban life, and a chance to bond. Imagine two senators casually chatting about legislation while sitting side by side on cold marble seats. One passing the sponge on a stick, yes, we'll get to that later. The other passing emotion, figuratively and literally. Rather than a lack of building materials or engineering skill, the openness of Roman restrooms was a cultural choice. They valued connection, interaction, and networks, both social and, well, you get the idea. Even during their most personal business, Romans would hold conversations, discuss deals, catch up on city gossip, and perhaps even debate the latest gladiator match results. In their world, bodily functions weren't shameful. They were just life. Shared, experienced, and, yes, sometimes even laughed about. The boundaries between public and private were far softer than ours today. And no one blushed at the sound of nature calling. Now here's a curious thought. Could using the toilet alongside strangers have reinforced a sense of social equality? Think about it. Whether you were a senator in a toga or a street vendor selling olives, everybody at the end of the day had to go. Of course, latrine in wealthy villas offered a touch more comfort. But still, the act itself, sitting, squatting, wiping, was a shared human experience. In a society deeply stratified by class, wealth, and status, public toilets offered a peculiar kind of leveling ground. No pun intended. It's quite poetic, really. In these communal latrine spaces, stripped of titles, jewelry, and fanfare, Romans simply became what they truly were, humans, trying to get through the day one bowel movement at a time. So tonight, as you gently close your eyes, let the sound of ancient marble echo in the distance, and imagine a world where even a toilet seat brought people together, where laughter, news, and maybe even philosophy flowed freely, along with everything else. Sleep soundly, dear friend, and dream of Rome, not the one in battle armor or golden laurels, but the one where neighbors shared more than bread and wine. They shared time, talk, and the tiniest of toilet tales. Good night. Part 2. Class Divide, when cleanliness became a status symbol. Now, you might imagine that Roman public toilets were a place of perfect equality. After all, everyone, rich or poor, needs to answer nature's call eventually. And when you're sitting shoulder to shoulder on a long marble bench, chatting about the latest gossip or perhaps the Senate's latest drama, it sounds almost democratic, doesn't it? Well, not quite. You see, even in the latrine, the Roman toilets, social class made its presence very clear. Let's begin with the elites. Yes, the Roman upper crust. When they needed to go, they went in style. Their toilets were not just functional, they were practically luxurious lounges. Picture this: sparkling white marble, delicate frescoes on the walls, beautifully crafted mosaic tiles beneath your feet, maybe even a little breeze floating through a private courtyard. Not bad for a bathroom, right? Now, contrast that with the facilities for the common folk. Well, less sparkle, more splinters. Instead of marble thrones, there were basic wooden or stone benches lined up with simple holes, and let's just say, ventilation might have been more wishful thinking than architectural reality. But this wasn't just about comfort. Oh no. This divide told a bigger story. It was a symbol, a declaration even. To sit in a clean, beautiful, even artistic toilet wasn't just about hygiene, it was about power, status, and wealth. It was Rome's way of saying, look at me. Even my bathroom is better than your living room. Kind of like today's airport VIP lounges, or members-only clubs. You might be in the same building, but you're definitely not in the same world. And yes, even the act of paying to pee had its social layers. While not all public toilets charged a fee, many did, and for the poorest Romans even a small coin could be a barrier. This brings us to a rather famous tale. Emperor Vespasian, a practical man if there ever was one, introduced a tax on urine collected from public latrines. His son Titus disapproved of this rather unconventional revenue stream. To which Vespasian calmly held up a coin and said, "Pecunia non olet," money does not stink. A classic Roman wisdom. Leave it to them to turn waste into wealth. And thus, even human waste became a tool of economic policy. So you see, Roman toilets were far more than just a place to, well, go. They were tiny theaters of social order, little mirrors reflecting the hierarchy of Roman life. Whether it was marble or moss beneath you, whether you paid or passed for free, the latrines showed who you were, and more importantly, who you were not. Even in the most equal of places, Rome found a way to remind you exactly where you stood. And that, dear listener, is the sound of civilization. Flushing with status. Part 3. Toilets, gods, and a touch of superstition. Yes, even Roman latrines had a spiritual side. Now, here's a curious little twist in the tale of Roman toilets. You see, for the ancient Romans, going to the bathroom wasn't just a physical necessity. It was, believe it or not, also a spiritual affair. Strange? Perhaps. But for a people deeply religious and delightfully superstitious, it made perfect sense. Even in the most, shall we say, private corners of their cities, the gods were never far away. In fact, tucked away near or even inside many latrini, that's the Roman term for public toilets, you might stumble upon tiny shrines or statues dedicated to gods. Not war gods or love goddesses, mind you, but deities who had a rather down-to-earth portfolio: health, hygiene, and luck. And really, who doesn't need a little luck when squatting over a stone bench in a public restroom? Among the favorites was Fortuna, the ever-smiling goddess of fortune, and Salus, the gracious lady of health. But perhaps the most fitting figure of them all was Cloacina, a goddess specifically associated with the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's grand sewer system. Yes, the Romans had a goddess for drains. Respect. These divine patrons weren't just decorative either. Romans would sometimes make offerings or mutter little prayers while visiting the loo, hoping for cleanliness, good health, or just to avoid whatever mysterious illness was lurking in those communal seats. And considering that Roman medicine had its limits and plagues were, well, a frequent visitor, it's easy to see why they turned to the divine for a little backup. But it doesn't stop there. Beyond the official pantheon, the Romans also believed in a whole host of protective spirits. Lares, they called them. And yes, even mischievous or downright spooky ones. Some folks, feeling wronged or vengeful, would inscribe curses, called depictions, onto lead tablets, and check them right into the sewers, hoping the gods of the underworld would, shall we say, take care of business. So next time you flush, maybe be grateful nothing comes back. This rather unusual mix of plumbing and prayer tells us something revealing about Roman life. For them, there was no hard line between the sacred and the mundane, the spiritual and the sanitary, the divine and the digestive. Even in the humble restroom, the Romans sought protection, luck, and maybe even a sense of peace. Because in a world full of uncertainty, where illness could strike without warning and medicine was a gamble, sometimes the best thing you could do was light a little candle next to the toilet and whisper a prayer to a goddess of sewage. Strange? Yes. Endearing? Absolutely. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's a quiet reminder that even the ancient world found comfort in the smallest rituals, in the oddest places, at the most human of moments. So rest easy. The gods are watching over you. Even in the bathroom. Part 4. From Toilets to Cultural Treasure. The Anthropological Value of Roman Latrines. Now, let's take a moment to sit back, close our eyes, and imagine not the grand marble forums, not the glittering columns of Rome, but instead, the Roman toilet. Yes, you heard that right. A latrina. You see, when we look at the humble Roman toilet, we're not just staring at ancient plumbing. We're gazing into a time capsule of human behavior. A little stone bench with a hole in it, yes, but also a portal into the habits, beliefs, and daily lives of an entire civilization. Anthropologists, with their curious minds and sturdy stomachs, have uncovered surprisingly rich insights by studying these ancient public restrooms. Through them, we learn that the Romans weren't just excellent conquerors or philosophers. They were brilliant engineers and masterful organizers too. They designed complex aqueducts, sewer systems, and public latrines that could serve bustling cities of thousands. These feats weren't just clever, they were essential. Their water management systems laid the groundwork for much of the sanitation infrastructure we now consider standard. But, let's not get too romantic here. Even with all that technical genius, the Romans were still blissfully unaware of the microscopic world. Germs? Bacteria? Didn't exist in their textbooks. So while they had flowing water and fancy marble slabs, they also had some, shall we say, aromatic challenges. And then there's the social side of things. To us modern folks, the bathroom is a sacred space. Private. Locked door. Do not disturb. But to a Roman, the public toilet was just that, public. Imagine sitting side by side with your neighbors, chatting away, perhaps discussing politics or the latest gladiator gossip. All while, well, you get the idea. Privacy? Not really a thing. For the Romans, sharing a toilet was no more awkward than sharing a loaf of bread. In fact, it was rather communal. It's a concept that gently nudges us to reflect on how our culture shapes even the most basic behaviors. Why do we value solitude in the restroom? And how did the Romans find comfort in company, even there? It's not wrong. Just different. Finally, these ancient latrines also remind us to appreciate the little luxuries of modern life. That humble flush of water. That soft roll of toilet paper. That quiet fan humming above. All of it is the result of thousands of years of trial and error. Progress built, in part, by the folks who first sat on cold stone benches with a clear view of their neighbors' knees. So yes, this is more than just toilet history. It's human history. A journey from shared latrines to sensor-activated smart toilets. A story of progress. Of people trying, in every era, to stay just a little bit cleaner. And a little more comfortable. Even in the smallest of spaces. So next time you press that silver handle, spare a thought for the Romans. They walked, so we could flush. Chapter 6. From Rome to the present day, the curious journey of cleanliness. And now, dear listener, let us continue our gentle journey through the corridors of time. This time we turn our gaze to a rather delicate topic. Sanitation. Yes, toilets, sewers, and all the glorious, and sometimes not so glorious, ways humanity has tried to deal with, well, what happens after lunch? But fear not, this won't be messy. We'll begin by stepping out of the marble-paved streets of ancient Rome, with its glittering aqueducts and communal latrines, and into what came after. Spoiler alert, it's not pretty. Part 1. The Fall of a Great System, when Europe took a step backward. When the Western Roman Empire crumbled in 476 AD, Europe didn't just lose its emperors and senators. It also lost its plumbers. What followed was a long, foggy chapter we often call the Dark Ages, and it was dark in more ways than one. Without a strong central government to keep things flowing literally, the once great Roman sanitation systems were left to rot. Aqueducts, those mighty stone bridges that once carried water over hills and valleys, were abandoned. Left unmaintained, they crumbled like old biscuits. And the sewers? Oh, the Roman sewers, once the pride of the empire, mighty tunnels sweeping away the city's waste, were now blocked, broken, or tragically transformed into oversized trash heaps. Public toilets, once a staple of Roman urban life, vanished. The grand communal latrines, complete with smooth marble seats and gentle running water, were replaced by buckets. Or pits. Or worse, absolutely nothing at all. People returned to what one might generously call rustic methods of waste disposal. Night soil jars were tucked beneath beds. Chamber pots were flung from windows. Streets became rivers of filth, and open ditches carried more than just rainwater. It was as if cleanliness had packed its bags and taken a long vacation, and forgot to come back. It's hard to imagine, really. One moment, Europe is bathing in aqueduct-fed fountains. The next, it's ankle-deep in sewage. And with poor hygiene came consequences. Big ones. The Black Death, for instance, yes, that Black Death, swept across Europe in the 14th century like a storm of sorrow. While the true culprit was a microscopic bacterium named Yersinia pestis, the unsanitary conditions acted like a welcome mat, inviting plague-carrying fleas and rats into homes, cities, and hearts. Now, to be fair, blaming it all on bad plumbing might be a stretch. But let's just say the lack of clean streets didn't help. What we lost during this time wasn't just technology, it was a whole mindset. The Roman commitment to public hygiene, to clean water and shared latrines, had faded into myth. For centuries, people didn't just forget how to build good sewers, they forgot why they mattered. It would take generations, no centuries, for Europe to rediscover the wisdom of sanitation. To rebuild. To rinse and repeat. But let's not be too harsh on our medieval friends. After all, they were doing their best, without soap, without sewers, and with a very casual attitude toward chamber pots. Part 2. The Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the slow, stumbling return of cleanliness. The Middle Ages. A time of knights and castles, of epic quests, and, well, some truly questionable hygiene. Throughout this long, drafty chapter of European history, personal cleanliness was more rumor than reality. Cities often reeked of a pungent perfume brewed from uncollected waste, rotting food, and the occasional dead rat. You see, public sanitation was less of a priority, and more of a mystery. In many medieval castles, the so-called garde-robes, a charming French term that might sound like a place to hang your robes, were in reality little more than holes in the stone wall, leading directly to the moat below. Romantic, isn't it? Especially when the wind blew the wrong way. Common folk fared no better. Their daily routines involved wooden buckets, backyard pits, and sometimes the nearest dark alley, because when nature calls, she doesn't wait for plumbing. As for cleaning up this mess, that sacred duty fell to a group of brave souls known as night soil men. Their job? To collect human waste under the cover of darkness. Glamorous? No. Necessary? Absolutely. Heroic? Depends on your standards. But let us not despair entirely. Not all corners of medieval Europe were lost in filth. In some bustling trade hubs, like Florence and Venice, rudimentary sewage systems began to emerge. Primitive, yes, but a hopeful glimmer in the murk. And in monasteries and abbeys, monks quietly led the charge toward cleanliness. With flowing water channels built to wash waste away, these sacred places offered a glimpse of order amidst the chaos. Perhaps cleanliness was next to godliness after all. Then came the Renaissance, a breath of fresh air. Literally. As scholars dusted off ancient Roman manuscripts and rekindled an interest in science, art, and logic, the idea of hygiene began to make a modest comeback. Thinkers studied Roman engineering with admiration, realizing that, yes, maybe it was a good idea to separate drinking water from sewage. Still, progress was slow. Soap didn't become fashionable overnight, and many urban dwellers remained deeply suspicious of bathing. It wasn't until plagues kept sweeping through overcrowded cities, again and again, that people started to connect the dots. Dirty streets? Sick people? And so, near the end of the Renaissance and into the early modern age, efforts finally began to take shape. Town officials organized street cleanings. Public latrines appeared, with varying degrees of charm. Fines were even introduced for tossing waste out the window, a common pastime in medieval cities, usually preceded by a shouted warning, if you were lucky. True, these early attempts at sanitation didn't hold a candle to ancient Rome's marvels. But they were steps forward. Wobbly, hesitant, somewhat smelly steps. Toward a cleaner, healthier future. Part 3. The Sanitation Revolution. From smelly pits to sparkling porcelain thrones. Now, let us gently drift into the 19th century. A time when humanity was quite literally knee-deep in its own mess. Cities were growing like weeds. People were pouring into urban centers, chasing the dream of industry and progress. But as the population swelled, so did the number of, well, outhouses and dubious facilities. Yes, dear listener. With narrow alleys, cramped slums, and open sewage, the Industrial Revolution didn't just bring steam engines. It brought cholera, lots and lots of cholera. It was in this rather fragrant moment of history that something remarkable began to stir. Enter Sir Edwin Chadwick, a man who looked at overflowing cesspits and thought, this seems unhealthy. Sir Chadwick was no ordinary bureaucrat. He had a curious mind and a strong stomach. He conducted meticulous studies linking poor sanitation to deadly disease. His findings were grim, his charts even grimmer. And with the determination of a man who'd clearly had enough of bad smells, he began pushing for change. Thanks to his relentless campaigning, the Public Health Act of 1848 came into being in Britain, laying the very foundation of modern sanitation. This wasn't just about emptying chamber pots more efficiently. It was the birth of sewer systems, clean water supplies, and the understanding that maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop dumping waste in the nearest river. But wait. No tale of sanitation would be complete without the toilet. Yes, the humble, heroic flush toilet. While the credit for the first such contraption goes way back to the 16th century, to none other than Sir John Harington, godson of Queen Elizabeth I, who gifted her a device that whooshed waste away. It wasn't quite ready for prime time. It took the brilliance of Alexander Cumming and Joseph Brahma in the 19th century to perfect the S-trap, that magical curve in your plumbing that keeps the stench down where it belongs. Suddenly, the modern flush toilet was no longer just a royal novelty. It became a household dream. And then, as if sanitation needed a mic drop moment, along came Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch. These scientific titans revealed a shocking truth. Diseases weren't caused by bad air or mysterious mists, the dreaded miasma. No, the real culprits were tiny invisible creatures, germs. This discovery transformed hygiene from a luxury to a life-saving science. Suddenly, washing your hands wasn't just good manners. It was a battle cry against death. Disinfecting, sterilizing, and treating water became the new holy trinity of health. And so, from Chadwick's sewer blueprints to Pasteur's lab experiments, from the echoing flush of a porcelain bowl to the soapy lather in your bathroom sink, a quiet revolution was underway. A revolution that didn't march with banners or drums, but whispered gently through cleaner streets, longer lifespans, and the beautiful absence of that all-too-familiar city stink. Sleep well tonight. On soft sheets in a world where flushing is easy, disease is rarer, and you no longer have to share a wooden bench over a communal pit. You can thank the heroes of the sanitation revolution for that, one clean flush at a time. Part 4, Global Sanitation, Challenges and a Glimpse into the Future. Once upon a very modern time. In a world not ruled by emperors in togas but by engineers with laptops, we've come a long way in the grand tale of sanitation. From humble beginnings involving sticks and sponges, yes really, we now live in an age where toilets can clean themselves, flush with whisper quiet grace, and even greet you with a warm seat on a cold morning. Water treatment systems can turn murky wastewater into crystal clear H2O. A magic trick so advanced even the Romans, proud as they were, might bow their heads in awe. Toilet paper has gone from non-existent to quilted luxury. Antibacterial soap flows freely from chrome dispensers. And complex underground pipework hums quietly beneath our cities. All these marvels, mundane to many, are everyday miracles of modern comfort. But alas, our story doesn't end with sparkly bathroom tiles and automatic air fresheners. Despite the leaps and bounds of progress, there are still billions, yes billions, of people who live without access to something as basic as a safe toilet. In many developing nations, the absence of proper sanitation remains a silent crisis, one that spreads disease, threatens lives, and takes a heartbreaking toll, especially on children. You see, even with our ultra-modern tech, the old Roman lesson still holds true. If you want a healthy, thriving society, you'd better invest in the plumbing, infrastructure, science, engineering, and, of course, good old community awareness. These are the pillars of a clean, safe, and dignified life. And so, the journey continues. Visionaries and inventors around the world are hard at work, designing toilets that use no water at all, finding ways to reuse waste with a wink of sustainability, and building sanitation systems that could someday serve even the most remote villages on Earth. From the sponge stick of Roman bathhouses, to the smart toilet that greets you by name, yes, that exists. The story of sanitation is far from over. It is a tale of evolution, of creative problem solving, and of our shared human desire to live in a world that's just a little cleaner, a little safer, and a lot more comfortable. So next time you flush your toilet, spare a thought for the long road that got us here, and the road still left to travel. Now, close your eyes. Let the hum of pipes and the quiet swoosh of progress lull you to sleep, and dream of a world where every bathroom break is a moment of peace, not a battle for basic dignity. Good night, and may your dreams be sanitized and soap-scented. Chapter 7. The Influence and Legacy of Roman Sanitation in Our Modern World. Let's take a gentle stroll down the marble-paved paths of history and discover how ancient toilets still make a splash in our lives today. Part 1. The Foundation of Modern Urban Infrastructure. Now, have you ever flushed your toilet and for just the briefest moment wondered, who came up with this marvel of modern convenience? Oh, well, you're not alone. Most people don't give much thought to where their water goes after a flush or where that rainy puddle disappears to after a storm. But tonight, we'll let our minds wander just a little back through the misty corridors of time, to the era of togas and sandals. Yes, we're heading straight into ancient Rome. Because when you flush that toilet or hear the gentle gurgle of rainwater disappearing down a storm drain, you are, in fact, paying quiet tribute to a Roman engineer. Though I doubt they expected to be remembered this way. You see, after the Roman Empire crumbled, their sanitation systems were buried, not just in the earth but in memory. For centuries, the brilliance of their underground infrastructure was forgotten. But the ideas? The genius of it? It lingered, like a whisper beneath cobblestone streets. Today's sprawling sewer networks in modern cities, vast tunnels that collect waste and carry it far from our homes, are in essence the spiritual successors of Rome's Cloaca Maxima, the great drain of the ancient world. It might sound like the name of a villain in a superhero movie, but in truth, it was one of Rome's proudest engineering feats. The Romans understood something essential. Gravity is your best friend, especially when it comes to getting rid of unpleasant things. They calculated slope and flow with astounding precision. They didn't just dig holes and hope for the best. No, Roman engineers ensured that water moved continuously, smoothly, effortlessly, like a gentle lullaby in liquid form. Their aqueducts brought water from distant hills and mountains to the heart of cities, feeding fountains, baths, and, yes, those very public toilets where Romans gathered not just to relieve themselves, but to chat, gossip, and do a bit of business. Yes, public restrooms were the coffee shops of their time. Minus the coffee. Even our modern reservoirs and water pipelines echo the Roman knack for channeling resources efficiently. In fact, every time you turn on the tap or enjoy a warm shower, you could say you're taking part in a long-running Roman tradition. Minus the togas, of course. So what's the takeaway? Well, the Romans weren't just building arches and gladiator arenas. They were laying the groundwork for something just as epic. A clean, healthy, well-drained city. They gave us more than ruins and ruins of pasta recipes. They handed us the blueprint for living comfortably in a modern metropolis. So tonight, the next time you flush the toilet, or hear the patter of rain echoing through a drain pipe, smile. Because somewhere deep beneath your feet, and deep in history's embrace, the legacy of Roman sanitation is still quietly doing its job. One flush at a time. Part 2. Public Health Wisdom, A Roman lesson that still stands today. Now, lean back, breathe slowly, and let's take a gentle stroll down the marble corridors of ancient Roman common sense. You see, one of the Romans' most remarkable, though occasionally imperfect, contributions to human civilization wasn't a shiny aqueduct or a fancy toga. It was something far more down to earth. Public health. Yes, that thing we often take for granted today. Long before anyone had the slightest clue about bacteria or viruses, before microscopes and way before hand sanitizer, the Romans had a gut feeling that cleanliness mattered. They didn't know about microbes, but they did notice that places full of waste and dirty water usually ended up full of sick people too. Coincidence? The Romans didn't think so. So what did they do? Well, being Romans, they went big. Massive public bathhouses, thermae, where people came to soak, scrub, and socialize. Gigantic communal toilets with surprisingly sophisticated plumbing. And yes, they even had an ancient form of toilet paper, a shared sponge on a stick called the xylospongium. Which, if you ask us, might be the strongest argument for modern hygiene in all of history. But let's give credit where it's due. These marble-loving engineers were pioneers. Their efforts to dispose of waste properly, supply clean water, and build sanitary public facilities laid the groundwork for what we now call public health infrastructure. In fact, many of the pillars of modern public health, water regulation, waste treatment, and communal hygiene, are just modern reboots of Roman ideas. Sure, they didn't have germ theory, but they were headed in the right direction. And of course, not everything went smoothly. There were problems with noxious gases in the sewers, the occasional spread of disease through shared sponges, yes, that sponge again. But these setbacks were valuable teachers. They reminded us that infrastructure alone isn't enough. You also need knowledge, education, and a firm commitment to personal hygiene. The Romans gave us a hint, but it was up to future generations to complete the puzzle. Today, when organizations like the World Health Organization work to improve sanitation in developing regions, they're still drawing on the same core principles the Romans once held dear. Clean water, safe waste disposal, and yes, good hygiene habits. So, the next time you flush a toilet, or turn on a tap and watch clean water flow, give a quiet nod to those sandal-wearing thinkers from 2,000 years ago, because their legacy isn't just crumbling ruins and Latin phrases. It's also in the fresh, invisible breath of health that we enjoy every day. Part 3. The Roman Touch on Architecture and Urban Design. Now, let's take a gentle stroll, not just through Roman sewers, but through the architecture and city planning they quietly influenced, all the way to today. You see, the Romans didn't stop at plumbing. No. They went a step further, turning the humble toilet into a design element. Yes, you heard that right. Toilets, as part of architecture. Roman public toilets, latrines, weren't just tucked away in dark alleyways. Oh no. They were proudly integrated into large public complexes, bathhouses, marketplaces, and bustling forums. It was a clever model, basic hygiene woven seamlessly into social life. Imagine chatting politics while seated on a marble toilet with 10 others beside you. Cozy, right? This blending of utility and community, well, it's still with us today. Modern shopping malls, train stations, and parks all carry this Roman legacy. Public restrooms, conveniently placed, discreetly modern, and thankfully with dividers. Of course, we've since upgraded from the no-wall communal seating situation. Today's facilities offer privacy, doors that lock, and hopefully toilet paper. But the core idea? That everyone deserves access to clean shared spaces for, well, relief. That's pure Roman genius. And then there's the style. The Romans didn't just build toilets, they made them luxurious. Marble benches, colorful mosaic floors. Honestly, some Roman latrines were fancier than modern bathrooms in five-star hotels. Fast forward a couple thousand years and guess what? We're still doing it. Marble countertops, mosaic tiles. A subtle nod to the ancients who knew how to make even a pit stop feel elegant. But let's not forget the flowing water. Oh, the water. Romans believed in the power of a steady stream. To clean, to carry, to flush away troubles. Quite literally. They engineered a system where fresh water constantly flowed through the sewers and toilets, keeping things hygienic. It was their version of the modern flush. No buttons, no motion sensors, just gravity and good plumbing. And while engineers today have refined this system with tanks and valves and pressure control, the basic principle remains. Water goes in, waste goes out. So the next time you flush, spare a quiet moment of gratitude for those toga-clad innovators who believed that sanitation was a civic virtue, and who proved, long ago, that even a gentle stream can change the world. Part 4. A gentle reminder of civilization's evolution. Let's take one last look back at the curious tale of Roman hygiene. Now, it's tempting to only remember the Roman world for its grand aqueducts, its marble baths, or, let's be honest, its communal sponge-on-a-stick situation. But beneath all the peculiar habits and engineering marvels lies something a little deeper. A quiet but powerful reminder of how far human civilization has come. You see, the story of sanitation isn't just about toilets and plumbing. It's a tale of creativity, of adaptation, of humanity's relentless, and often slightly messy, pursuit of a better life. The Romans, in their tunics and sandals, didn't just build public latrines for convenience. They laid the groundwork for something much more profound. The idea that cleanliness, comfort, and public health are worth planning for and building for. And yes, even writing entire bedtime stories about. It makes you think, doesn't it? Today we casually flush a toilet without a second thought. We sip clean water from the tap. We take long, hot showers in our own private little sanctuaries. And yet, none of this was guaranteed. These comforts are the result of thousands of years. Of experiments, of trial and error, of some very brave plumbers, and maybe a few unfortunate accidents. Each step forward, from the Roman sponge stick to the Japanese self-warming Bluetooth-enabled bidet of today, was built on layers of accumulated knowledge. And yes, sometimes a whole lot of trial and a whole lot of error. But there's more to this story than just gratitude for our flushable lives. The Roman toilet tale also offers us something to reflect on, a lesson in adaptation. The Romans didn't wait for perfect solutions. They worked with what they had. Stone, water, clever minds, and a good sense of communal cooperation. That spirit, that willingness to solve problems with creativity and courage, is something we could all use today, as we face new challenges, from climate change to overcrowding and beyond. Who knew a dusty latrine from 2,000 years ago might inspire us to tackle the future? So here we are, at the end of a not-so-glamorous journey into the world of Roman hygiene. And maybe, just maybe, you're beginning to feel it too, that even the humblest corners of history, the ones most folks would rather skip, can carry surprisingly deep lessons, and if nothing else, can gently lull us into a dreamy appreciation of warm baths, clean towels, and the miracle of modern plumbing. So now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and remember, even history's boring bits have a place in our dreams. Good night, and may your dreams be free of sponge sticks. Chapter 8. The Things You Never Thought About. When it comes to toilets. Yes, toilets. And now, we arrive at our final chapter. This is where we gently pause, take a quiet breath, and reflect once more on something you probably never expected to think deeply about before bed. The humble, and yes, often underappreciated, toilet. Let's take one last look, with a warm smile, at all the things you might not have considered about this most practical of human inventions. Part 1. The Magic of Modern Comfort. It's more than just a hole in the ground. After walking together through the winding roads of ancient Rome, where people sat side by side on cold stone benches, where a sponge on a stick was the height of hygiene, tell me honestly, do you still think the toilet is a boring subject? I hope not. Because as odd as it may sound, the story of sanitation is actually a deep, fascinating chapter in the book of human civilization. It's not just about, well, relieving oneself. It's about engineering, public health, social progress, and yes, culture too. So, before we drift off tonight, let's take a quiet moment to truly appreciate the wonders of our modern bathroom. That feeling when you step into a clean private restroom, the soft click of a door lock, the gentle swoosh of a flush, and the comforting softness of toilet paper. The little luxuries we hardly notice. But each of these simple acts represents thousands of years of trial, error, and innovation. The flush toilet itself? An engineering marvel, with a clever water trap to keep bad smells at bay. Running water that arrives at your home with a twist of a tap? A miracle of urban planning. And the massive, invisible labyrinth of underground sewage systems? Trust me, the Romans would have lost their togas in sheer amazement. We take these comforts for granted. But truly, being able to go to the bathroom in peace, cleanliness, and safety, that is not something everyone in the world enjoys. Not yet. For billions of people, this remains a distant dream, a quiet longing for dignity. So tonight, as we think back on those ancient Roman toilets, on the communal stone seats and the shared sponge shudder softly, perhaps we can look at our own toilets with a little more admiration. Because a toilet isn't just a hole. It's not just a porcelain throne or a necessary fixture. It's a symbol of human progress, of what happens when a society chooses to care about health, about dignity, and about each other. Investing in sanitation means investing in life. And with that, perhaps now more than ever, you can fall asleep tonight knowing that even the toilet has a story worth telling. Part 2. Sanitation, the unsung measure of a civilized society. Yes, sanitation. It might not be the most glamorous topic to muse upon as you're snuggling into bed, but if you've ever found yourself immensely grateful for a clean bathroom on a road trip, then you, my friend, already understand just how important this humble matter truly is. You see, sanitation isn't just about keeping things tidy. It's a quiet but powerful reflection of how far a society has come. A civilization that can manage its waste effectively and provide basic hygiene for its people is a civilization that has its act together, at least in one very important department. Take the ancient Romans, for instance. Now there was a people who knew how to take care of their, well, business. They built public latrines, aqueducts, and elaborate sewer systems centuries ahead of their time. Sure, their streets weren't always pristine, and their methods weren't perfect. But by the standards of the ancient world, Rome was a clean freak's paradise. They understood something quite profound. A clean city isn't just about appearances, it's about health, prosperity, and dignity. The smellier the streets, the sicker the people. And the Romans were nothing if not pragmatic. But then came the fall. When Rome collapsed, much more than power and politics crumbled. Europe descended into what we now call the Dark Ages. And with it, sanitation seemed to take a very long holiday. Sewers were neglected, waste was tossed into the streets, and diseases waltzed through the population like they owned the place. Let's just say, if you think your plumbing is bad now, you'd be counting your blessings in medieval Europe. Thankfully, humanity learned a thing or two over the centuries. Today, when we talk about building smart cities or sustainable communities, sanitation is still one of the first boxes to tick. The United Nations has even declared access to clean water and safe toilets as a basic human right, a bold and very welcome step forward. Around the world, governments and communities are working hard to ensure everyone everywhere can relieve themselves with comfort, cleanliness, and dignity. So, the next time you walk past a public restroom, or flush the toilet in the comfort of your home, pause for just a moment. Because what you're experiencing is not just a convenience, it's a quiet monument to engineering, public health, and human progress. A porcelain symbol of civilization itself. And perhaps, just perhaps, the cleanest reminder we have of how far we've come. Now, breathe out. Let the thought of a world with working plumbing soothe your mind, and drift gently off to sleep, knowing that you live in an age where sanitation doesn't require sandals and a sponge on a stick. Good night, and may your dreams be as clean as a Roman bathhouse. Part 3. The Voice of History from the Most Unexpected Places. A gentle, slow historical bedtime tale with a touch of humor. Who would have thought that from a topic as seemingly unremarkable as Roman toilets, we'd stumble upon such a treasure trove of knowledge? You see, history isn't only made of kings and queens, wars and inventions. It also lives in the quiet corners, in the soft echoes of daily life, in the humble routines we often overlook, like the latrine. Yes, the toilet. That most private of spaces. Turns out, it holds some of the most revealing clues about ancient Roman life. The archaeological remains of latrinae, the scribbled ancient texts about hygiene rituals, and the delightfully absurd tales of the sponge on a stick. Yes, that was a thing. All help us piece together a vivid and surprisingly relatable portrait of Roman society. These remnants remind us of something deeply human, that no matter the era, people have always had basic needs, and while the needs might stay the same, the solutions to those needs? Oh, they vary wildly, depending on the time, the technology, and the rather creative cultural beliefs of the day. So, what does a deep dive into ancient toilet habits teach us? Well, first, that history can be weird. Second, that it can be wonderfully funny. And third, and perhaps most importantly, that behind every stone ruin, every dusty scroll, and even every bathroom sponge, there's a story waiting to be told. You see, exploring the odd bits of history doesn't just amuse us. It stretches our minds. It invites us to question what we take for granted, and reminds us that even the smallest details of daily life carry echoes of the past. So next time someone tells you history is dry, you can smile gently, lean in close, and whisper, "Let me tell you about the Roman toilets." And just like that, in the quiet of the night, the past speaks softly once more, guiding you gently into dreams, one sponge on a stick at a time. Part 4. Connecting with the present and a gentle call to action. Slow, soothing narration with a soft smile. And so, our humble journey through the oh-so-boring world of Roman toilets has come to a close. Strange, isn't it? We began with public stone benches and shared sponges, and somehow we ended up reflecting on ourselves. Hopefully, this little detour into history gave you a whole new way of looking at things. Not just at ancient plumbing, but also at the comforts we enjoy today. And perhaps even at the curious, ever-evolving creature known as you. The story of hygiene, you see, is never truly finished. From communal sponges passed hand to hand, to voice-activated, mood-lighting, self-warming toilets of today, humanity has always found a way to, well, freshen up. It's a gentle reminder that progress is never static. And each of us, in our own way, yes, even from the seat of modern luxury, plays a part in pushing that story forward. So, if you found this video even a smidge amusing, or if you quietly whispered, "Ha!" at any point, why not stick around for more? There's an entire world of boring history just waiting to surprise you. Click that subscribe button. Ring the little bell so you don't miss our next quirky tale. And if someone in your life would chuckle at the thought of ancient Roman bathroom breaks, go ahead, share the video. They'll thank you, probably. Oh, and before you drift off to sleep, drop us a comment below. What was the one thing that truly surprised you about Roman toilets? The shared sponge? The lack of doors? Or just the fact that we've been talking about this for nearly 20 minutes? Thank you, dear friend, for walking through history with us tonight. We'll see you next time, in another curious corner of the past. Sleep well, and may your dreams be cleaner than Roman sewers.